Hello. Well, we have here two giants of the intellectual world, and I don't suppose it should be any surprise to any of us that a conversation between two people like that will start with a little bit of willy waggling. And they did. It was quite amusing, actually. They're talking about the breakdown in civilization. So Douglas Murray quotes Miguel de Unamuno, who was a philosopher, writer, and he criticised General Franco's followers. And one of Franco's most respected advisors, General Milan Astrai. General Astrai responded with "Viva la muerte!" Long live death. Because Murray was talking about the sort of death cult behaviour of Hamas as an example, but also, well, the students who are out literally banging drums for Hamas on the streets of the Western world. So he quoted Unamuno and then, of course, O'Neill, not to be outdone, quotes Herta Müller and her comment about a complete break with civilization. So I thought that was quite funny. But as for the rest of the conversation, not funny at all. And I listened to the whole thing, so you don't have to. I'm Granniopteryx. Please like this video. Please share it, please subscribe, and you can contribute, the various links in the description. You can contribute to my Keep My Horses Healthy fund. Okay, well, let's get on with it then. So I made some notes, and Brendan O'Neill is talking about the sudden passion for the Palestinian cause, specifically the Hamas cause, as a break with civilization. Now, it occurred to me a little while ago that if I were an alien, let's go back to that 2001. What happened was, a spacefaring civilization came across a bunch of hominids and realised that either with or without interference, sometime in the future, those hominids are going to develop into a spacefaring nation of their own, and they left a sort of fire alarm. Now, the original story by Arthur C. Clarke had the fire alarm on Mars, but in the film it was on the moon. And as soon as humans got to see that fire alarm and started fiddling with it, it sent out a signal which then warned the spacefaring nation that there was going to be some rivalry somewhere from that sector of space. Right, well, it occurred to me, if I were a spacefaring nation, I wouldn't need to go to all that trouble. I mean, it's very difficult to deal with something like a fever or whatever when it is in full fever mode. It's best to catch it before it even starts, isn't it? So what you have to do, if you're interested in stopping another civilization from interfering, developing and posing some sort of a rivalry problem somewhere down the line, what you have to do is implant a sort of self-limiting factor into that civilization which will prevent it from making any progress. And in my opinion, I'm not saying that happened in the case of this particular civilization, the world civilization. But if you implanted something like Islam into world civilization, then you'd have no problems with spacefaring anymore, would you? Because there is something so irrational about Islam that sooner or later it's going to stop any development beyond a certain point. Now, that it didn't start like that, by the way, but it definitely started in the 12th century with a sort of, I don't know whether you call him a scientist or a philosopher, because, in that time, you were always a bit of both, weren't you? But his name was Al-Ghazali, and he came up with the idea. Now, up to about he lived at the end of the 11th and the beginning of the 12th century. In the 10th century, Muslim, or rather scientists in the Muslim world, were coming up with all sorts of discoveries. That's why half the stars we know the names of, they're all Arabic names. And, scientific distillations like, alcohol, alcohol, the blue stuff in Arabic. All these inventions and discoveries, they were all not all Arabs and not all Muslims, but they were in a Muslim world that was just frothing with inventiveness and inquiry. And that all came to a stop at about the time of Al-Ghazali. Now, he wasn't the only one, of course, responsible, but he did provide a framework which stopped Islam in its tracks. And his idea was this, that, we know that if you take a piece of cotton and you put a flame to it, it's going to burn and it'll turn into ash and be consumed. Well, what Al-Ghazali said was that Allah had decreed that that was going to happen. And if Allah had decided that that wasn't going to happen, it wouldn't happen. You could hold the cotton over the flame as long as you like. If Allah decided it wasn't going to burn, then it wouldn't burn. Now, this became a very important aspect of the Muslim view of Allah. I'm not going to call him God because he has a special characteristic. The God that Jews and Christians, the Jews came first, that's why I changed the way I was constructing that sentence. The difference between the God of the Jews and Christians is that that particular God devised some physical laws to which he himself is subject. That is the idea that God has created a universe which runs on certain laws and God himself is bounded by those laws. Whereas Allah creates the world every microsecond. Everything that happens is Allah's doing, and because of that he can change any of the laws anytime he wanted. So if Allah decided right now to go no more universe, that would be it. It would all disappear. It would it wouldn't explode, it wouldn't evaporate, it would just disappear. You see, there's a difference. The Judeo-Christian God can't do that, because he is part of the physical world. There's a rabbinical argument about God being omnipotent. I'm sure you must have heard of this. God's omnipotent, so can he create a stone that's so heavy he can't move it? Well, you've got a problem here, haven't you? Because if he can't create a stone that's so heavy he can't move it, then he's not omnipotent. On the other hand, if he can't move a stone, then he's not omnipotent. And I suppose, I haven't gone into that aspect of rabbinical philosophy at any depth, but I suppose that was just to illustrate the importance of God being bound by universal physical laws. I don't recollect anything like that turning up in Muslim philosophy. In fact, it's possible, I'm just speculating here, but it's possible that that's actually heretical to speculate on that. Anyway, so that's the huge difference between the Judeo-Christian God and the Muslim God. And Al-Ghazali was part of that. Ghazal was a part of Persia. It's just by the by, one of those little bits of general information that I'm absolutely full of, which is why nobody in my family will play Trivial Pursuit with me. Well, they will if I play all of them. Which, never mind. Anyway, Ghazal is a part of Iran, and it was a place famous for its natural beauty and creatures, particularly a type of deer. From which we get the name gazelle. So there, when you say somebody is as graceful as a gazelle, you're actually using an old Arabic word. Okay, well, yeah, that I really have gone off topic. So I made some notes here, and the thing is that when you study the Gaza problem, you will see it's a completely irrational problem. There is an irrationality in Muslim culture that shouldn't exist in Western culture, because Western culture doesn't have that theological framework. And it's being taken on now. Brendan O'Neill and Douglas Murray didn't actually discuss it in those terms, but they were discussing the idea of the death cult of Hamas and how people in the West are taking this on. And O'Neill is talking about this complete break with civilization. And then he pointed out that it was anti-Westernism. And indeed it was. The Muslim idea of a lack of physical structure, really, means a lack of laws. You can suspend laws in the same way as Allah could suspend the universe. O'Neill didn't say that either. But he did say it was anti-Westernism. And indeed, this whole thing, this whole Gaza business has less to do with Gaza itself, or even the suffering of the people who live there, because Hamas are definitely not bothered about them. They built shelters for themselves, but not for the Gazans who live there. And they trained the Gazans into acting like beasts in order to use them as cannon fodder. So O'Neill was talking about this, and then he and Douglas Murray were discussing anti-Semitism in the context of its irrationality. And they said that the irrationality comes from the left. And we've been, they said that the left has always been anti-Semitic and irrational, because the two go together. But now the right is getting irrational as well, and that really worries them. And how irrationality and anti-Semitism are sort of conflated with each other. Now, always something to hate Jews for, but much of it was projection. Yeah, so the Israelis are accused of being colonists when half the world speaks English because of English colonialism, or a good deal of the world speaks Arabic because of Arab colonialism. So both Murray and O'Neill agreed with each other that this was all projection. You blame Israel for everything that you are worried about in yourself, either worried about your history or worried about your ambitions. So a lot of the Muslim world hates Israel because it's in the way of their colonial ambitions, and a lot of the Western world hates Israel because they are worried about their colonial traditions. So that's hang on. So that's what they said about that. And then Murray said that no campus is going to close down, in fury about the hundreds of thousands of deaths in Sudan. But anything that happens to one single Gazan is intimately scrutinised. Because minutely, it says here, everyone is minutely interested in every action in Gaza. And then Brendan O'Neill said that this trend really worries him because scapegoating Israel, well, the left have been doing that for a while, but the right is doing it now because they have the idea that if it weren't for Israel, then America would have perfectly peaceful relations with everybody in the Middle East, which is, of course, a lot of horse manure. I think a lot along the lines of horses. And I have to remind you that I think the best-selling book in the entire Muslim world is Mein Kampf, Hitler's magnum opus. And Murray, oh, so terribly English, he says, yes, that's very disappointing. And then they talked about Muslim anti-Semitism. And of course, that's going from Mein Kampf to that. Yeah, anti-Semitism is absolutely baked into Islam. It's also pretty strong in Christianity, but Christianity is coming out of that. But in Islam, the Jews were most disparaging about Muhammad, who reckoned he was a prophet and they reckoned he wasn't. And he was responsible for actually killing Jews for their lack of trust in his divinity or semi-divinity. And because of that, Islam has a very solid background in hating Jews. Brendan O'Neill then asked, what can we do about this? And Murray made a very good comment on that. He said, the question is, can the modern democratic state say no? And then he went on to explain, can it say there are some things we just don't allow? And if you're going to do those things, then you can hop it. He actually used the word hop it. We don't want you here. And the interesting thing is that many of the people making comments under my videos, who I assume in general are a certain type of person and a certain demographic, and obviously people who tend to agree with me more than those who don't, although there are a couple of trolls as well. You are definitely the sort of people who are saying, if you don't like the way we do things in the West, then hop it. You are. And there are many people, I'm going to bring Peter Lynch up here again, poor Peter Lynch, who was, done away with one way or another by the British state for saying exactly that. This is the way we do things in the West, and you, the government, the police, are complicit in allowing another philosophy to take over. And the British elite didn't like that. The British police didn't like that. And I think many people in Britain would agree with Douglas Murray there, that we should have the strength to say we don't like this and we're not having it. But, as Murray said, most British politicians are full of words about this and talk about it all the time, but don't actually do anything. He brought up Sir, C-U-R, Keir Starmer, saying how angry he was about the boats. But what's he done about them? Well, bugger all, if you'll forgive the expression. And then he said, which is something that's not anything we didn't know, that anti-Semitism, he called it, I've called it the canary in the coal mine, and he said it's one of the early warning sirens of a collapse of civilization. And I believe he's right. And it's one of the reasons I keep making videos, by the way, trying to warn people. And I'm not warning anyone who isn't actually aware of that already. But what I am doing is telling you, you are not alone. And then he finished off with this wonderful, succinct one-liner. We've got to keep fighting it, he said. It matters. It's not much good in being proved right after everything's gone wrong. And on that note, I'll leave you to ponder that. Okay, till next time. You can help my channel by subscribing and clicking the notification bell. That's quite important. And by sharing if you're so inclined. Links to my other channels and to donation methods are in the description. But the best way you can help is simply by clicking like and notify. Thank you.